Imagine a species so confident in their technological superiority that they dismiss warnings from what they consider primitive worlds. Imagine fleets so vast they blot out stars, wielding weapons that can crack planets. Now imagine that same unstoppable armada encountering something they never expected, a quiet blue world that politely asked them to leave. This is the story of the Corvani Empire, rulers of 1,000 worlds, and their fatal mistake of underestimating Earth. When diplomacy failed and warnings went unheeded, humanity showed the galaxy why some sleeping giants should never be awakened. What happened next would be whispered across the cosmos for generations, a reminder that sometimes the greatest power lies not in the size of your fleet, but in the determination of those defending their home. Admiral Zakthos stood before the massive viewing screen of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the blue-green world slowly rotate beneath them. Earth, the humans called it. Such a simple name for what his intelligence reports claimed was the homeworld of over 8 billion sentient beings. The Corvani had encountered many primitive species during their expansion across the galaxy, but none had been quite so peculiar as these humans. Admiral, his communications officer, called from across the bridge, her scaled hands dancing over the holographic interface. "We're receiving another transmission from the planet's surface. Same frequency, same polite tone." Zakthos's mandibles clicked in annoyance. For 3 days now, ever since the Corvani Third Fleet had entered this system, the humans had been broadcasting the same message. Not demands, not threats, not even pleas for mercy. Just a simple, repeated warning delivered in perfect Corvani standard. "Play it again, Lieutenant Vexera," he commanded, his forearms crossing behind his back in the traditional stance of Imperial authority. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a calm human voice filled the command center. The translation matrix had identified the speaker as female, though Zakthos found it difficult to distinguish between the various subsets of this mammalian species. "This is Ambassador Sarachan of the United Earth Federation, speaking to the Corvani fleet currently in our solar system. We welcome you to our space and hope for peaceful relations between our peoples. However, we must inform you that Earth and its colonies are under the protection of defensive systems that will activate if we detect hostile intent. We strongly advise maintaining your current distance while we arrange formal diplomatic contact. Earth has no desire for conflict, but we are prepared to defend ourselves if necessary. Please respond on this frequency if you wish to establish peaceful dialogue." The message ended, and silence returned to the bridge. Several of Zakthos's officers exchanged amused glances, their chittering laughter echoing off the metallic walls. The Admiral himself felt a surge of dark humor. These humans spoke of defensive systems as if they possessed technology that could threaten the Corvani Empire. The Third Fleet alone contained over 1,200 vessels, including 6 planet crackers and 47 heavy battlecruisers. Each ship in his fleet could reduce entire continents to molten slag. "Intelligence assessment, Commander Hixtau," Zakthos ordered, not turning from the viewport. His intelligence officer, a tall Corvani with distinctive purple markings across his scaled skull, stepped forward with a data pad in his primary hands. "Earth appears to be a standard Class M world with conventional defensive capabilities, Admiral. Our long-range scans detect orbital platforms, satellite networks, and ground-based installations. Nothing beyond typical primitive world military infrastructure. Population density suggests they're still confined largely to their planetary surface, with only basic spacefaring capability. And their fleet? Minimal, sir. Perhaps 36 vessels in system, most appearing to be converted cargo haulers or patrol craft. Nothing that would register as a significant threat to even our smallest destroyer." Zakthos finally turned from the viewport, his black eyes gleaming with the confidence that came from commanding the most powerful military force in known space. The Corvani Empire had conquered over 1,000 worlds in the past century, each one falling within days of their arrival. Some species fought bravely, but futilely. Others surrendered immediately upon seeing the vast armada that darkened their skies. The humans, it seemed, fell into a third category, those delusional enough to believe they could negotiate from a position of weakness. "Sir," Communications Officer Vexera called again. "The humans are transmitting technical data. Ship specifications, defensive capabilities, even detailed information about their orbital installations. They appear to be voluntarily providing intelligence about their own military assets." This brought a chorus of surprised clicks and chirps from the bridge crew. In all their campaigns, they had never encountered a species that willingly revealed their defensive capabilities to an invasion force. Zakthos moved to the communication station, reviewing the data streaming across the holographic displays. The information was remarkably detailed and, according to their analysts, appeared to be completely accurate. The humans had disclosed everything from the positions of their hidden asteroid bases to the technical specifications of their most advanced warships. It was either the most naive diplomatic gesture in galactic history or the most sophisticated trap ever devised. Analysis suggests the latter is highly unlikely, Commander Hickstal noted, having reviewed Zakthos's thoughts through their neural link interface. Human technology appears to be approximately 400 years behind our current standard. Their most powerful weapons are kinetic projectiles and primitive energy beams. Their defensive shields operate on simple electromagnetic principles that our weapons could penetrate with minimal effort. Then, why, Zakthos mused, studying the technical readouts, are they providing us with this information? What possible strategic advantage could they gain from revealing their weaknesses? Perhaps they hope to demonstrate their helplessness, suggested Chief Navigator Kelthon from her position near the tactical display. Some species attempt to appeal to mercy when faced with overwhelming force. The Corvani do not practice mercy, Zakthos replied automatically, though something about the human behavior continued to puzzle him. In his experience, primitive species either fought with desperate fury or cowered in terror. These humans seem to be doing neither. Their communications remain calm, professional, almost confident, as if they genuinely believed their warnings carried weight. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out suddenly, his voice carrying a note of curiosity. "I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures from the planet's surface. Multiple sources scattered across all continents. The readings are inconsistent with their declared technology level." Zakthos moved to the sensor station, reviewing the data himself. Indeed, there were energy patterns emanating from various points on Earth that didn't match the technical specifications the humans had provided. The signatures were subtle, barely detectable even with Corvani sensors, but they were there. "Could be industrial facilities," Commander Hickstal suggested. "Or perhaps they're concealing some of their capabilities." "No," Zakthos said slowly, his tactical mind working through the possibilities. "If they were hiding advanced weapons, they wouldn't have revealed their conventional forces so completely. This is something else." Another transmission came through from the planet's surface. This time, the voice was different, older, with what the translation matrix identified as authority markers common to military leaders. "This is General Marcus Webb of the Earth Defense Council, addressing the Corvani fleet. We have monitored your vessels for the past 72 hours, and note that you have not responded to our diplomatic overtures. While we continue to hope for peaceful resolution, we must inform you that our defensive protocols have now been activated. Any approach within the designated perimeter will be considered an act of aggression. We strongly urge you to establish communication and withdraw to a safe distance while negotiations proceed." The transmission ended, but this time something had changed. Zakthos felt it immediately, a subtle shift in the energy readings from the planet below. The mysterious signatures he had detected earlier had suddenly increased in intensity, though their purpose remained unclear. "Weapons lock detected," his tactical officer announced calmly. "Multiple sources planet-wide. Sir, they're targeting our entire fleet simultaneously." A murmur of surprise rippled through the bridge crew. Targeting a fleet of 1,200 vessels simultaneously required computational power and sensor accuracy far beyond what their intelligence suggested the humans possessed. Zakthaz studied the tactical display, watching as red targeting indicators appeared around each ship in his fleet. Assessment, Lieutenant Cragmore. His tactical officer's claws clicked nervously against his control interface. Sir, the targeting is precise. They've locked onto specific systems on each vessel: engines, weapons arrays, command centers. The computational requirements for such an operation should be beyond their technological capabilities. Should be, Zakthaz repeated thoughtfully, but apparently is not. Interesting. Orders, sir? Commander Hickstal asked. Shall we proceed with standard invasion protocol? Zakthaz was quiet for a long moment, considering his options. Standard protocol called for an immediate assault once hostile intent was detected. The Third Fleet had sufficient firepower to reduce Earth's entire surface to a lifeless wasteland within hours. It's something about this situation felt different from their previous campaigns. The humans' behavior was unprecedented. Their calm warnings, their voluntary disclosure of military intelligence, their apparent confidence despite facing overwhelming odds. Sir, the communications officer called again. We're receiving a new transmission. This one is different. Different how? It's on a secured military frequency that our intelligence indicated the humans don't possess. The encryption is, sir, it's using algorithms we don't recognize. Our translation matrix is having difficulty processing it. Play what you can decipher. The speakers crackled with static. Then, a new voice emerged. Younger than the previous speakers, but carrying an edge of steel that made several bridge officers straighten unconsciously. Corvani Fleet, this is Commander Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Network. You have been warned 3 times to maintain safe distance and establish diplomatic contact. You have ignored these warnings and maintained an aggressive posture in our space. We are implementing final protocol. You have 1 hour to withdraw beyond the heliopause, or we will be forced to defend our homeworld. This is not a threat. This is a promise. The transmission cut off abruptly, and for a moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of the ship's systems. Then, Lieutenant Vexera's voice cut through the quiet, her tone uncharacteristically uncertain. Sir, that transmission, it originated from somewhere in the asteroid belt. Our sensors show no significant installations there, but the signal strength suggests a major facility. And, sir, there's something else. Report. The energy signatures from the planet have changed again. They're not just stronger, they're different. The quantum resonance patterns don't match any known technology in our databases. It's as if they're using principles of physics that our science hasn't encountered. Zakthaz stared at the tactical display, watching as more red indicators appeared across the screen. Whatever the humans were doing, it was spreading throughout their solar system. Installations that hadn't existed on their initial scans were now revealing themselves, each one radiating energy patterns that made his sensor officers nervous. Admiral, his chief science officer called from the analysis station. I'm detecting massive gravitational fluctuations near several of the gas giants. And, sir, something is happening to the space around our fleet. The quantum substrate is destabilizing. For the first time since entering the system, Admiral Zakthaz felt a flicker of uncertainty. The Corvani Empire had conquered 1,000 worlds by understanding their enemies better than their enemies understood themselves. But these humans were presenting variables that didn't fit any of his strategic models. Send a response, he commanded finally. Inform the humans that the Corvani Empire does not negotiate with primitive species. We will proceed with our occupation schedule as planned. Resistance is futile. As his communications officer transmitted the message, Zakthaz turned back to the viewport, studying the deceptively peaceful blue world below. Whatever was happening here, whatever technology the humans actually possessed, he would discover it soon enough. The Third Fleet had never failed to complete a conquest, and he wouldn't allow these strange mammals to be the first exception. But as he watched Earth slowly rotate beneath his fleet, something cold settled in his stomach, a feeling he hadn't experienced in decades of warfare. For the first time in his career, Admiral Zakthos wondered if his enemy knew something he didn't. The humans had warned them. They had been polite about it, almost apologetic. But they had warned them nonetheless. In 60 minutes, he would discover whether those warnings had been empty words or something far more dangerous. The countdown to final protocol had begun, and somewhere in the depths of space, ancient systems that had slumbered for millennia began to wake from their long sleep. Earth had tried to avoid this moment, had offered every opportunity for peace. Now, as the Corvani fleet prepared for what they assumed would be another routine conquest, humanity prepared to show the galaxy why some warnings should never be ignored. The hour passed with agonizing slowness aboard the Eternal Dominion. Admiral Zakthos had positioned himself at the primary tactical station, monitoring the increasingly strange energy readings emanating from throughout the solar system. What had started as subtle anomalies had grown into massive power signatures that defied every principle of physics in the Corvani databases. 59 minutes, 37 seconds since the human ultimatum, reported his chronometer officer, a nervous young Corvani whose tail twitched with each passing moment. No sign of fleet withdrawal from either side. Commander Hickstal approached the Admiral's position, his expression troubled. "Sir, our deep space sensors have detected something extraordinary. The gravitational distortions around Jupiter are intensifying. Whatever the humans have built there, it's operating on a scale that should be impossible for their technology level." Zakthos studied the sensor readings, his experienced eye trying to make sense of the data. Jupiter, the massive gas giant that dominated the outer solar system, was showing gravitational fluctuations that suggested the presence of artificial structures with mass comparable to small moons. Yet their initial surveys had detected nothing beyond primitive mining operations in the asteroid belt. Could they have hidden installations inside the planet itself? He wondered aloud. Theoretically possible, his chief science officer replied from her station. But the engineering requirements would be staggering. Building inside a gas giant would require technology centuries ahead of what they've demonstrated. Yet here we are, detecting structures that shouldn't exist, Zakthos muttered. He activated the fleet-wide communication system, his voice carrying the authority of absolute command. All ships, maintain current positions, but prepare for immediate tactical deployment. Something is not as it appears in this system. Across the vast expanse of the Third Fleet, 1,200 Corvani vessels adjusted their formations. Battle cruisers powered their primary weapons arrays, while the massive planet crackers began the lengthy process of charging their world-killing main guns. If the humans wanted a demonstration of Corvani power, they would receive one that would be visible from the edge of the galaxy. 30 seconds to deadline, the chronometer officer announced, his voice barely steady. Zakthos found himself holding his breath, something he hadn't done since his first command decades ago. Around him, the bridge crew worked with mechanical precision, but he could sense their underlying tension. They had faced desperate enemies before, but never one that maintained such calm confidence in the face of impossible odds. "Sir," the sensor officer called suddenly, his voice sharp with alarm. "I'm detecting massive power spikes across the entire solar system. Every planet, every major asteroid, even the sun itself, is showing abnormal energy patterns. It's as if the entire system is awakening." Before Zakthos could respond, space around his fleet began to change. What had appeared empty vacuum moments before suddenly shimmered with barely visible distortions. The quantum substrate itself seemed to be rippling, like water disturbed by some massive underwater presence. "Time," announced the chronometer officer unnecessarily. Everyone on the bridge could feel it. The moment of truth had arrived. The response came not as a transmission or a weapons fire, but as a voice that seemed to speak directly into their minds. Every Corvani in the fleet heard it simultaneously, bypassing their communications systems entirely and resonating through their consciousness like the tolling of some cosmic bell. "You were warned." The voice was human, but it carried harmonics that suggested vast networks of interconnected consciousness. It spoke with the weight of planets, the patience of geological ages, and the gentle sorrow of a parent forced to discipline a wayward child. I'm the Solar Defense Network. The voice continued, its presence filling every corner of space around the fleet. I am the guardian of this system and the protector of humanity. You have chosen aggression over diplomacy, conquest over cooperation. You have ignored our warnings and threatened our home. Now you will learn why Earth's children sleep peacefully beneath their distant stars. The space around the Corvani fleet suddenly erupted with light. Not the harsh brilliance of weapons fire, but something far more terrifying, the cold, patient glow of awakening technology. Massive structures phased into visibility throughout the solar system, revealing themselves like flowers blooming in fast forward. These weren't the crude, orbital platforms the humans had declared in their technical specifications. These were constructions that dwarfed entire Corvani battle groups, their surfaces alive with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Impossible, breathed Commander Hickstal, staring at the tactical display as it updated with hundreds of new contacts. Those structures, they're using the planets themselves as construction frameworks. Jupiter isn't hiding installations. It is an installation. Admiral Zakthos watched in fascination and growing horror as the truth revealed itself. Jupiter's great red spot, which their intelligence had dismissed as a simple atmospheric storm, was actually a massive electromagnetic lens focusing energy from the gas giant's core. Saturn's rings weren't debris from ancient collisions. They were the visible components of a defense grid that spanned the entire orbit. Even Mars, which had appeared to be a barren desert world, was now revealing vast underground facilities that extended deep into the planet's mantle. How long? Zakthos demanded. How long have they been building this? The voice in their minds answered, carrying notes of ancient patience. The Solar Defense Network has been under construction for over 3,000 years. Every generation of humanity has contributed to its growth, each adding their knowledge and dedication to the protection of our species. We hope never to use it. We try to warn you. 3,000 years. The number hit Zakthos like a physical blow. The Corvani Empire was barely 800 years old, yet these humans had been preparing for this moment since before his species had achieved spaceflight. Every diplomatic contact, every warning, every polite request for negotiation had been backed by a defense system that predated his entire civilization. Sir, his tactical officer called, her voice cracking with strain. The targeting locks they're not just on our ships anymore. They're on every individual system, every crew member, every quantum of energy in our fleet. The computational power required for this level of precision is beyond measurement. Zakthos looked at his sensor displays and felt something he had never experienced before: true fear. The humans hadn't just targeted his fleet, they had mapped it down to the molecular level. Every rivet, every power coupling, every individual Corvani aboard every ship was being tracked with impossible precision. It was as if some vast intelligence had reached out and gently taken his entire fleet in an invisible hand, holding it with casual ease while deciding its fate. You still have a choice, the voice continued, its tone remaining patient despite the awesome power behind it. Withdraw from our space. Return to your empire and tell them that humanity desires peace, but will not accept conquest. Leave now, and you'll be allowed to depart safely. Your crews will return to their families. Your ships will see their home ports again. Choose. For a moment, Zakthos wavered. Everything in his tactical training screamed that retreat was the only logical option. The humans had demonstrated technological superiority so vast that resistance was not just futile, it was incomprehensible. Yet the weight of imperial pride, of 800 years of unbroken conquest, pressed down upon him like a physical force. The Corvani Empire does not retreat, he declared, his voice carrying across the fleet communications network. We are the conquerors of 1,000 worlds. We will not be intimidated by primitive mammals and their tricks of light. He turned to his weapons officer. All ships, open fire. Show these humans the true meaning of power. The response from his fleet was immediate. 1,200 ships unleashed their fury simultaneously, filling space with enough destructive energy to sterilize entire star systems. Planet crackers fired their main guns, sending beams of pure annihilation toward the blue world below. Battle cruisers launched volleys of antimatter torpedoes that could punch through planetary cores. Destroyer squadrons added their own firepower to the devastating barrage, creating a wall of death that raced toward Earth at significant fractions of light speed. For a moment, the awesome display of Corvani military might dominated the solar system. The very space around Earth glowed with incoming destruction, as if a new star had been born from pure violence. It was the concentrated anger of an empire that had never known defeat, the fury of a species that considered itself the apex of galactic evolution. Then, the Solar Defense Network responded. The incoming barrage simply stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed, but halted in space as if it had encountered an invisible wall. Antimatter torpedoes hung motionless in vacuum like deadly ornaments. Planet-cracking beams froze mid-flight, their terrible energy contained within invisible barriers that bent space itself. The entire devastating assault was held suspended in a three-dimensional web of forces that treated the laws of physics like mere suggestions. Impressive, the voice acknowledged, carrying what might have been genuine admiration. Your weapons show remarkable sophistication. Your tactics demonstrate centuries of military evolution. Your courage in the face of impossible odds speaks well of your species' character. But you were warned. What happened next would be spoken of in whispers throughout the Corvani Empire for generations to come. The frozen weapons fire began to move again, but not toward Earth. Instead, each beam, each torpedo, each pulse of destructive energy turned around with surgical precision and began tracking back toward the ships that had fired them. No, Commander Hickstow whispered, watching as the tactical display showed their own weapons approaching their own fleet. This is impossible. You can't simply reverse antimatter reactions. You can't redirect energy beams through space. The quantum mechanics alone. Your science is young, the voice replied gently. You understand force and reaction, cause and effect, the crude manipulation of matter and energy. But you have not learned that consciousness itself is a fundamental force of the universe, that will and intention can shape reality when properly focused. Humanity has had 3,000 years to study these principles. We have become very good at learning. The first impacts began reaching the outer ships of the fleet. Corvani vessels, designed to dish out massive destruction, proved surprisingly fragile when faced with their own weapons. Battle cruisers that had terrorized 100 worlds found themselves crippled by their own antimatter torpedoes. Destroyers that had reduced planets to rubble watched in horror as their own energy beams sliced through their hulls like paper. But even more terrifying than the destruction was its precision. Each returned weapon struck with surgical accuracy, disabling weapon systems, crippling engines, destroying offensive capabilities while leaving life support intact. The humans weren't trying to slaughter the Corvani fleet. They were systematically and methodically disarming it, like a parent taking dangerous toys away from children who had proven they couldn't be trusted to use them safely. Admiral, his damage control officer called out as the Eternal Dominion shuddered under the impact of its own weapons. We've lost main guns, secondary armaments, and engine control. Life support is holding, but we're completely dead in space. Around them, the pride of the Corvani Empire was being methodically dismantled by its own firepower. Ships that had seemed invincible hours before now drifted helplessly in space, their crews unharmed, but their vessels reduced to little more than pressurized habitats. The systematic precision of it was more terrifying than any berserker rage could have been. It spoke of intelligence so vast, control so complete, that the very concept of resistance became meaningless. Sir, the sensor officer called weakly. I'm reading total fleet casualties. 1,200 ships disabled. 0 fatalities. Every vessel in the fleet has been precisely neutralized without loss of life. Zakthos stared at the tactical display, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. In less than an hour, the most powerful military force in Corvani history had been rendered completely helpless. Yet not a single crew member had been killed, not a single life pod had been launched, not a single distress signal had gone unanswered. The humans had demonstrated the ability to destroy them completely while choosing instead to show mercy. The voice spoke once more, its tone carrying infinite sadness and infinite patience. You were warned, Admiral Zakthos. Your empire taught you that strength comes from the ability to destroy, that power means the capacity for violence. But true strength lies in the wisdom to protect rather than conquer, to build rather than destroy. Your fleet will be towed to the edge of our solar system and released. Your crews will be given supplies and medical assistance as needed. You will be allowed to return to your empire with a message. What message? Zakthos asked, his voice barely a whisper. That humanity extends the hand of friendship to all species willing to grasp it. That we will defend ourselves if we must, but prefer to defend others who cannot defend themselves. Tell your empire that Earth offers alliance, not conquest. Tell them that the stars are vast enough for all species to find their place among them. Tell them that we warned you and that we hope next time they will listen. As massive force fields began to envelope the disabled Corvani ships, preparing them for their journey home, Admiral Zakthos finally understood the true meaning of power. It wasn't the ability to destroy enemy fleets or crack planets or terrorize primitive species. True power was the capacity to end a war before it truly began, to transform enemies into allies through strength tempered with mercy. Earth had warned them. They had ignored the warning. Now they would carry a new message back to the stars, not of defeat, but of possibility. The universe had changed, and the Corvani Empire would need to change with it or find itself left behind by species who had learned the greater lessons of existence. The humans had promised to show them why Earth's children slept peacefully beneath distant stars. Now Zakthos understood. It was because their parents were watching, patient and vigilant, ready to protect not just themselves, but anyone willing to join the family of peaceful worlds. The age of conquest was ending. The age of cooperation was about to begin. 3 months after what historians would later call the warning, Admiral Zakthos found himself in a position he had never expected to occupy, sitting across a conference table from the very humans who had humiliated his fleet. The meeting was taking place aboard Harmony Station, a massive orbital facility that had materialized from apparently empty space shortly after the disabled Corvani fleet had been safely escorted to the edge of the solar system. The station itself was a marvel that challenged every assumption about human technology. Its corridors bent through dimensions that hurt Corvani eyes to follow. Its artificial gravity operated on principles their scientists couldn't explain, and its very existence seemed to mock the laws of physics as his people understood them. Yet despite its impossible architecture, the station felt welcoming, even comfortable, as if it had been designed by beings who understood that first impressions could shape the course of civilizations. More coffee, Admiral? Asked Ambassador Sarah Chun, the same human who had first attempted diplomatic contact with his fleet. She held a simple ceramic pot that somehow contained what their food specialists had analyzed as a perfectly balanced nutritional beverage adapted specifically for Corvani metabolism. The casual ease with which the humans had accomplished this adaptation, creating a new substance that their bodies could process within hours of first contact, was yet another reminder of capabilities that defied classification. "Thank you," Zakthos replied, extending his cup with one of his lower arms while keeping his primary hands folded in the traditional gesture of respectful attention. The coffee was excellent, perfectly temperature-controlled and flavored with subtle compounds that enhance Corvani cognitive function. Even their hospitality was precisely calibrated to put their guests at ease, he realized. Nothing about human behavior was accidental. Across from him sat General Marcus Webb, the military commander whose voice had delivered the final ultimatum to his fleet. In person, Webb appeared to be a standard-sized human male, perhaps 60 Earth years old, with graying hair and lines around his eyes that suggested long experience with difficult decisions. There was nothing visually impressive about him. No cybernetic enhancements, no obvious genetic modifications, no external signs of the vast power he represented. Yet Zakthaz found himself treating the human with more respect than he had shown to Corvani Emperor generals. "I hope our accommodations have been satisfactory," General Webb said, his tone carrying genuine concern. "We know this situation is unprecedented for both our species. We want to ensure your delegation feels secure while we work through these negotiations." Negotiations. The word still felt strange to Zakthaz. The Corvani Empire didn't negotiate with conquered species. It dictated terms and expected compliance. Yet here he was, representing an empire that had learned it was not the dominant power in the galaxy, sitting down with representatives of a species that had every right to treat them as defeated enemies, but instead offered comfortable chairs and perfectly prepared refreshments. "The quarters are more than adequate," Commander Hickstal replied from beside him. His intelligence officer had insisted on accompanying the diplomatic mission, claiming he needed to understand how their initial assessment had been so completely wrong. Though we confessed to some confusion about the station's construction methods. "Our engineers are having difficulty understanding how several sections can occupy the same spatial coordinates simultaneously." Ambassador Chun smiled, an expression that Corvani found difficult to interpret, but which seemed to convey both amusement and patience. "Dimensional folding is one of our older technologies. Actually, we developed it about 800 years ago when we realized we were going to need much larger facilities than conventional space allowed. The principles are surprisingly simple once you understand that space itself is more flexible than most species assume." 800 years ago. Zakthaz mentally calculated the timeline. That meant the humans had mastered dimensional manipulation around the time the Corvani Empire was first taking its initial steps into space. While his ancestors were learning to build crude chemical rockets, these mammals had been rewriting the fundamental rules of physics. The scope of their technological head start was becoming increasingly clear and increasingly humbling. "Admiral," General Webb said, drawing Zakthaz's attention back to the present conversation. "We've prepared a comprehensive presentation about Earth's history and our development as a species. We think it might help explain why your fleet encountered such unexpected resistance. Would you be willing to review our records?" "Of course," Zakthaz replied immediately. Understanding the enemy, or in this case, the potential ally, was the foundation of all successful military strategy. Our intelligence reports proved woefully inadequate. We would welcome a more accurate picture of human capabilities. The conference room darkened, and holographic displays activated around them. The technology was seamless, creating three-dimensional images so perfect that Zakthaz momentarily forgot he was watching recordings rather than witnessing actual events. The first scenes showed primitive humans, barely out of their stone age, looking up at the night sky with expressions of wonder and determination. Humanity's relationship with space began with dreams. Ambassador Chen narrated as the images shifted to show early human astronomers studying the stars. Unlike many species that achieved spaceflight through military necessity or resource depletion, we reached for the stars because we were curious about what we might find there. The presentation moved through human history with breathtaking speed, showing the development of agriculture, writing, mathematics, and eventually primitive space technology. But even in these early stages, Zakthaz noticed something different about human development. Where most species focused on immediate practical applications, humans seemed driven by an almost compulsive need to understand the fundamental principles underlying everything they encountered. "This is when things became interesting," General Webb said as the display showed what appeared to be a primitive human space station, clearly recognizable as an ancestor of modern orbital facilities despite its crude construction. About 3,000 years ago, during what we call the First Space Age, human scientists made a discovery that changed everything. The scene shifted to show human researchers working with devices that looked suspiciously similar to modern quantum manipulation equipment. Zach Thos leaned forward, trying to understand how such primitive technology could have led to such advanced applications. We discovered that consciousness itself has measurable effects on quantum reality, Chen explained. Not in the mystical sense that many species imagine, but as a fundamental force that can be studied, understood, and eventually harnessed. It took us nearly 1,000 years to develop practical applications, but once we understood the principles, the holographic display exploded into activity, showing the rapid transformation of human civilization. Space stations grew from simple metal frameworks into the dimension-folding marvels they had just witnessed. Ships evolved from chemical rockets to vessels that seemed to ignore conventional physics entirely. Most impressive of all, the humans began building installations that incorporated entire planets into their defensive systems. The Solar Defense Network wasn't built, General Webb said quietly. It grew. Each generation of humans added their knowledge, their creativity, their determination to protect our home and our species. We didn't plan to become a major power in the galaxy. We just wanted to ensure that our children could look up at the stars without fear. Commander Hickstow clicked his mandibles nervously. General, with respect, your species possessed this level of technology for 3 millennia. Why did you allow the galaxy to believe you were primitive? Why didn't you expand beyond your solar system and claim territory like every other spacefaring species? The question hung in the air for a long moment. When Ambassador Chun finally answered, her voice carried a weight that suggested the question touched on fundamental principles of human philosophy. Because we learned something that apparently many species haven't discovered yet, she said. Power without wisdom leads to destruction. Strength without compassion creates only enemies. We watched the galaxy for centuries before making contact with any other species, studying how galactic civilization worked, learning from the mistakes of others. The holographic display shifted to show what Zakthos recognized as surveillance recordings of various Corvani military campaigns. His own ships appeared in several scenes, recorded without his knowledge as they reduced planetary defenses to rubble and claimed new worlds for the Empire. The images were disturbing when viewed from an outside perspective, the systematic destruction of civilizations that posed no real threat to the attackers. We watched your empire expand, General Webb continued, his tone remaining neutral despite the obvious condemnation implicit in the recordings. We studied your tactics, your technology, your motivations. We tried to understand what drove a species to consume entire civilizations rather than learn from them. Survival, Zakthos replied automatically, then paused as he realized how hollow the answer sounded. The galaxy is dangerous. Resources are limited. Only the strong survive to pass their genes to the next generation. Is that truly what you believe? Ambassador Chen asked gently. Or is that simply what your culture taught you to believe? The question struck Zakthos like a physical blow. He had spent his entire career accepting the fundamental principles of Corvani expansion without question. The strong conquered the weak. Resources belonged to those powerful enough to claim them. Military might determine evolutionary fitness. These weren't just political positions. They were the bedrock of Corvani civilization. Yet sitting here, surrounded by humans who had demonstrated power beyond his comprehension, while choosing to use it for protection rather than conquest, those principles suddenly seemed less like natural laws and more like convenient justifications for behavior that served the powerful at the expense of everyone else. Admiral, General Webb said, his voice carrying what Zakthos was beginning to recognize as typical human directness. We have a proposal for your empire. We'd like to offer an alternative to the cycle of conquest and resistance that has dominated galactic politics for so long. The holographic display shifted again, this time showing star maps that encompassed vast regions of space. Zakthas recognized Corvani territory, but also the holdings of dozens of other species, many of which his empire had planned to absorb in future expansion waves. We call it the Mutual Defense Compact, Ambassador Chen explained. A voluntary alliance of species committed to protecting each other rather than conquering each other. Shared technology, shared resources, shared security, but also shared responsibility to ensure that every member species can develop according to their own values and desires. You're proposing an alliance with the Corvani Empire? Commander Hickstal asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. After we attempted to conquer your homeworld? Especially because you attempted to conquer our homeworld, General Webb replied. You've demonstrated that you're capable of building powerful military forces and organizing them effectively. Those are valuable skills when applied to defense rather than conquest. We'd rather have you as allies working to protect the galaxy than as enemies forcing us to constantly watch our borders. Zakthas studied the star map, trying to process what the humans were proposing. Instead of demanding tribute or imposing occupation forces, they were offering partnership. Instead of reducing the Corvani Empire to vassal status, they wanted to expand it into something larger and more inclusive. It was completely contrary to everything he understood about post-conquest politics. What would be required of U.S.? He asked finally. 3 basic commitments, Ambassador Chen replied, counting off on her fingers. First, no aggressive expansion into the territory of other compact members. Second, mutual assistance in defending against external threats. Third, gradual transition from resource extraction to sustainable development. We've learned that permanent prosperity requires renewable rather than consumable assets. And in return, access to human technology appropriate to your development level, General Webb said. Not everything at once. We've learned that rapid technological advancement can destabilize societies, but gradual introduction of principles that will allow your science to advance naturally toward the same discoveries we've made. Zakthas felt his world tilting on its axis. The humans were offering to share the same technologies that had effortlessly defeated his fleet. They were proposing to transform the Corvani Empire from a predatory military machine into something that resembled their own philosophy of strength through cooperation. Why? He asked finally. Why make this offer to a species that just tried to destroy your homeworld? Ambassador Chen's smile was sad, but genuine. Because we've been watching the galaxy for a long time, Admiral. We've seen what happens when powerful species have no choice but conquest or destruction. We've watched promising civilizations burn themselves out trying to survive in a universe that teaches only violence and competition. We think the galaxy can be better than that. We think your species can be better than that. The conference room fell silent except for the subtle hum of the station's systems. Zakthas found himself staring at the star map, seeing it not as a collection of targets for future conquest, but as a community of worlds that might welcome Corvani participation rather than resist it. The idea was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. I will need to consult with my superiors, he said finally. This proposal, it would require fundamental changes to Corvani society. The Emperor Council would need to approve any modifications to our expansion protocols. Of course, General Webb replied. Take all the time you need. The offer will remain open regardless of your timeline for decision. But, Admiral, please convey to your leadership that this represents humanity's preferred method of resolving interspecies conflicts. We hope they'll find it more attractive than the alternatives. As the meeting concluded and the Corvani delegation prepared to return to their transport, Zakthas found himself wondering what those alternatives might be. The humans had demonstrated the ability to disable his entire fleet without loss of life. But what else were they capable of if pushed beyond diplomacy? What kind of response would they mount if faced with a species that rejected cooperation entirely? Perhaps, he thought as he walked through the impossible corridors of Harmony Station, some questions were better left unexplored. The humans had warned them. They had ignored the warning. Now they were being offered a second chance at a galaxy that might finally learn to value creation over destruction. He could only hope his empire was wise enough to listen this time. The response from the Corvani Emperor Council arrived 6 months later, delivered by a diplomatic vessel that approached Earth's solar system with all the caution of a prey animal entering a predator's territory. Admiral Zakthaz had spent those months compiling detailed reports about human capabilities, translating alien concepts into terms the Imperial leadership could understand, and advocating for acceptance of the Mutual Defense Compact with every persuasive tool at his disposal. The message he carried back was not what humanity had hoped for. Absolutely not. Supreme Emperor Krothdar had declared during the emergency session of the full Imperial Council. The Corvani Empire does not submit to primitive mammals. We do not negotiate as equals with species that should be serving as our slaves. These humans may possess impressive defensive capabilities, but they are still confined to a single star system. We control 1,000 worlds. They control one. The Emperor's response had been supported by the majority of the Council, though Zakthaz had noted significant dissent among the younger members and the military officers who had actually reviewed his complete tactical reports. Still, the decision was final. The Corvani Empire would seek alternative solutions to the human problem rather than accept subordinate status in an alien alliance. Now, as his diplomatic vessel approached the coordinates where Harmony Station had previously waited, Zakthaz wondered if he was about to deliver a death sentence for his entire species. The humans had demonstrated remarkable patience and restraint, but even the most peaceful civilization had limits. Would Earth's response to rejection be as measured as their response to invasion? Admiral, his communications officer, called from her station. We're being hailed by an Earth vessel. Sir, it's not showing up on any of our sensors. Zakthaz moved to the sensor array, confirming what his officer had reported. Their instruments detected nothing in the space ahead of them, yet their communication systems clearly indicated an artificial signal originating from that exact location. The implications were disturbing. The humans had developed stealth technology so advanced that Corvani sensors couldn't even detect a ship that was actively communicating with them. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth Vessel Meridian," came a familiar voice through their speakers. The same commander who had delivered the final ultimatum to his fleet, apparently promoted during the intervening months. "Welcome back to our space, Admiral Zakthaz. We're prepared to escort you to the diplomatic facility. Please follow our navigation beacon and maintain current speed." A gentle blue glow appeared ahead of them, marking a course deeper into the solar system. As they followed the beacon, Zakthaz noticed that they were taking a different route than his previous visit. Instead of approaching Earth directly, they were being guided toward what appeared to be empty space near the asteroid belt. "Sir," his navigator called out nervously, "the beacon is leading us toward coordinates that show nothing on our sensors. No stations, no facilities, no artificial structures of any kind. Continue following it," Zakthaz ordered, though his own unease was growing. Had the humans moved their diplomatic facilities? Were they being led into some kind of trap? Given the power disparity between the two species, such precautions seemed unnecessary, but military paranoia was difficult to suppress after decades of campaign experience. The answer came as they reached the coordinates indicated by the beacon. Space around them suddenly shifted, revealing not the small diplomatic station he had expected, but something that challenged his understanding of what was possible in the universe. Harmony Station had been impressive in its impossible architecture and dimension-folding corridors. This new facility was beyond impressive. It was a structure that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time, its surfaces reflecting light that came from no visible source. "Welcome to Nexus Station," Captain Vasquez's voice continued as their ship was gently guided into a docking bay that definitely hadn't existed moments before. "We've upgraded our diplomatic facilities since your last visit. I think you'll find the new accommodations more suited to extended negotiations." Extended negotiations. The phrase carried ominous implications. Did the humans expect the diplomatic process to take longer this time? Had they prepared for multiple rounds of discussion with various Corvani delegations? Or were they simply being optimistically thorough in their planning? The docking procedure was seamless, their ships settling into place without any sensation of contact or mechanical connection. Whatever technology the humans were using to manipulate their vessel, it operated below the threshold of Corvani sensory detection. They could have been held in place by focused gravity fields, dimensional anchors, or principles that hadn't been discovered yet. Admiral, his security chief murmured as they prepared to disembark. Something about this feels different from our last visit. More formal, more prepared, as if they were expecting us to arrive with bad news. Zakthaz nodded grimly. The humans had demonstrated an uncomfortable ability to anticipate Corvani behavior during their initial encounter. It was entirely possible they had predicted the Empire's response to the Alliance proposal and prepared accordingly. The question was what kind of preparation they had made, and whether it boded well for continued peaceful relations. The airlock opened to reveal Captain Vasquez herself, accompanied by a small delegation of humans in what appeared to be formal diplomatic attire. She was younger than General Webb, perhaps 35 Earth years, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to look through rather than at the Corvani delegation. Her bearing suggested military training, but her expression carried the patient professionalism of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. "Admiral, Commander Hickstow," she said, offering the traditional human greeting gesture of an extended hand. "Thank you for returning so promptly. We understand this has been a challenging period for your leadership." "Captain Vasquez," Zakthaz replied, accepting the handshake with proper diplomatic form. "We appreciate your continued hospitality despite the complications of our current situation." "Not complications," she corrected gently. "Just different perspectives that need to be discussed thoroughly. Please follow me." The conference facilities are prepared for extended dialogue. As they walked through corridors that bent through space in ways that hurt to contemplate, Zakthaz found himself studying the human delegation more carefully than during his previous visit. There were subtle differences, more military personnel mixed with the diplomats, more obvious security measures, more of the technological displays that reminded visitors of humanity's capabilities. The humans were still being hospitable, but they were also making sure their guests understood the full context of these negotiations. The conference room was larger than before, designed to accommodate what appeared to be multiple delegations simultaneously. Zakthaz counted seating arrangements for at least 6 different species, including accommodation for atmosphere preferences and gravitational requirements that suggested the humans were prepared for a much broader discussion than simple bilateral negotiations. "Please be seated," Captain Vasquez said, gesturing toward the familiar Corvani-adapted chairs. "Ambassador Chun and General Webb will be joining us shortly, along with some additional participants who I think will find this conversation interesting." Additional participants. Before Zakthaz could ask for clarification, the conference room's atmosphere shifted subtly, and beings began materializing in the previously empty seats. Not literally materializing. Even human technology presumably had limits, but entering through concealment methods so advanced that they achieved the same effect. The first arrival was clearly reptilian, with crystalline scales and eyes that held the deep intelligence of an ancient species. The second was avian, its feathers shifting color in patterns that suggested complex communication methods. The third was something that Zakthaz couldn't classify at all, a being of apparent energy and light that maintained a roughly humanoid shape through methods that defied analysis. "Admiral Zakthaz, Commander Hickstow," Captain Vasquez said formally, "allow me to introduce representatives of the Zephyrian Collective, the Skyward Nation, and the Void Dancers. They are founding members of the Mutual Defense Compact and have requested to participate in our discussions." Founding members. The words hit Zakthaz like a physical blow. The humans hadn't just proposed an alliance with the Corvani Empire. They had already established one with multiple other species. The defensive demonstration that had crippled his fleet hadn't been a human capability alone, but a collaborative effort representing unknown numbers of allied civilizations. "Greetings, Corvani warriors," the reptilian representative said, her voice carrying harmonics that the translation system rendered as profound respect mixed with genuine concern. "I am Sith of the Zephyrian Collective. Our species was approached by the humans 2 centuries ago, after our own encounter with their defensive capabilities. We found their proposal for mutual cooperation far preferable to the alternatives. The avian being ruffled his feathers in what seemed to be their equivalent of a diplomatic nod. I am Talonsinger of the Skyward Nation. We joined the compact after witnessing human intervention in a conflict between our people and the Zarathi Empire. The humans offered us protection from conquest and assistance in developing sustainable resource systems. We have prospered beyond our ancestors' dreams." The energy being spoke last, its voice resonating directly into their minds rather than through conventional sound waves. "I am pattern of thought becoming action of the Void Dancers. We exist partially outside conventional space-time, and initially regarded material species as curiosities. The humans taught us that consciousness takes many forms, all of which have value. We joined their alliance to protect diversity of thought throughout the galaxy." As the introductions concluded, General Webb and Ambassador Chen entered the conference room. Both humans appeared more serious than during Zakthaz's previous visit, their expressions carrying the weight of important decisions and potential consequences. "Admiral," General Webb said without preamble, "we've received your Emperor Council's response to our alliance proposal. We understand their decision, though we regret it. However, recent developments have created new complications that we need to discuss." "What developments?" Commander Hickstal asked, though Zakthaz suspected they weren't going to like the answer. Ambassador Chen activated a holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of local galactic space. Zakthaz immediately recognized Corvani territory, but was disturbed to see large sections of it highlighted in red warning indicators. 3 days ago, she explained, our monitoring systems detected massive fleet movements throughout Corvani space. Your Emperor Council appears to be marshaling forces for what our intelligence analysis suggests is a major military campaign. The target appears to be Earth and our allied worlds. The display zoomed in on specific star systems where Corvani battle groups were assembling. Zakthaz recognized the signature formations of conquest fleets, not the exploration and occupation forces used for normal expansion, but the massive armadas deployed when the Empire intended to destroy rather than conquer. Furthermore, General Webb continued, we've intercepted communications indicating that your military leadership has been in contact with several other aggressive species. The Zarathi Empire, the Bloodstars Consortium, and what appears to be a previously unknown faction called the Dominion Seekers. It seems your Emperor Council has decided to organize a coalition against the Compact rather than join it. Zakthaz felt his blood turn cold. The species General Webb had named were some of the most ruthless military powers in known space. Civilizations that made the Corvani Empire's expansion policies seem almost benevolent by comparison. If they were forming an alliance against Earth and its allies, the resulting conflict would likely devastate entire regions of the galaxy. I was not informed of these developments, he said carefully. My mission was purely diplomatic to deliver our leadership's response and await further instructions. We know, Captain Vasquez said gently. Our intelligence indicates that your Emperor Council didn't trust you to remain objective after spending time among us. They've classified you as potentially compromised by exposure to human philosophy. Your diplomatic mission was essentially a way to keep you occupied while they made military preparations. The betrayal stung more than Zakthaz wanted to admit. He had spent months advocating for peaceful coexistence with humanity, arguing that the Compact offered better long-term prospects than continued military expansion. To learn that his own leadership had dismissed his recommendations and moved forward with hostile preparations without even informing him felt like a fundamental violation of military protocol. The question now, Ambassador Chen said, her tone becoming more formal, is what happens next. Your Emperor Council has made their position clear. The other members of this coalition have made their intentions obvious through their military preparations. We need to decide how to respond to what appears to be an inevitable conflict. You're asking for my advice about fighting my own species, Zakthaz observed. We're asking for your opinion about preventing a galactic war, General Webb corrected. The forces currently assembling against the Compact represent approximately 40% of all military assets in this region of space. If this conflict begins, it won't end until one side or the other is completely destroyed. We prefer to find alternatives that don't result in the extinction of entire civilizations. Sith of the Zephyrian Collective leaned forward, her crystalline scales reflecting the conference room's lighting in patterns that suggested deep concern. Admiral, your species stands at a crossroads that mine faced 2 centuries ago. You can choose the path of endless military expansion, consuming other civilizations until you encounter something powerful enough to destroy you. Or you can choose the path of cooperative growth, contributing your strength to building something larger than any single species could achieve alone. The choice, however, may no longer be entirely yours to make, added Talon Singer of the Skyward Nation. If your Emperor Council proceeds with their current plans, they will force a response from the Compact. That response will not be limited to defensive measures around our home systems. The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. Zakthaz had witnessed the humans' defensive capabilities firsthand, but he was beginning to understand that what he had seen represented only a tiny fraction of what the Compact could deploy when truly threatened. An alliance of multiple species, each contributing their unique capabilities to a shared defensive network, would possess power beyond calculation. Admiral, General Webb said quietly, we're going to offer you a choice that your leadership has made impossible for your species as a whole. You and any Corvani who share your perspective are welcome to join the Compact as individuals, separate from the Empire's political decisions. We won't ask you to fight against your own people, but we can offer you protection from the consequences of their choices. The offer struck Zakthaz silent. Leave the Empire? Abandon everything he had built over decades of military service? Accept exile from his homeworld and his people? The idea was both terrifying and oddly appealing. He could see the same conflict in Commander Hicksdale's expression, the struggle between loyalty to their species and recognition that their species was making catastrophic mistakes. How long, he asked finally, before this conflict becomes inevitable? Our intelligence suggests the coalition fleets will be ready to move within 4 months, Ambassador Chen replied. That gives us time for continued diplomatic efforts, but realistically, we need to begin preparing for military action. And if the Compact wins this conflict? When the Compact wins this conflict, pattern of thought becoming action corrected with the confidence of a being that existed partially outside linear time. We will offer the same terms to any survivors that we originally offered to your empire as a whole. Membership in an alliance dedicated to mutual protection and cooperative development. We do not seek to destroy civilizations, Admiral. We seek to transform them. As the meeting concluded and the various delegates departed, Zakthaz found himself alone with his thoughts in quarters that were more luxurious than anything available aboard Corvani vessels. Through the transparent walls of his room, he could see the strange beauty of space as filtered through the station's dimensional manipulations. Stars that should have been light years distant appeared close enough to touch, while nearby asteroids flickered in and out of visibility as the station's defenses tested new configurations. He had come here to deliver his Emperor Council's rejection of the Human Alliance proposal. Instead, he had learned that his own species was about to become the primary target of forces that had casually disabled the most powerful fleet in Corvani history. The Empire had ignored Earth's warnings, rejected their offers of cooperation, and now faced the consequences of choosing conquest over collaboration. Tomorrow, he would need to decide whether his loyalty belonged to the empire that had abandoned him or to the alliance that offered a better future for any who were wise enough to accept it. The choice would define not only his own fate, but potentially the fate of any Corvani who survived the coming conflict. Earth had warned them. They had ignored it. Now, the galaxy would learn what happened when patience finally reached its limits and sleeping giants decided they had tolerated enough aggression. The age of conquest was ending, whether the conquerors accepted it or not. The war lasted exactly 17 hours. Admiral Zakthaz watched from the observation deck of Nexus Station as the greatest military force ever assembled in galactic history met its end with shocking swiftness. The coalition that Supreme Emperor Krothdar had spent months organizing represented the combined might of 4 major empires. Over 15,000 ships carrying enough firepower to reduce entire star systems to cosmic debris. They had approached the compact's territory with the confidence of predators who had never encountered effective resistance. They've been wrong about so many things. The Corvani Ninth Fleet is engaging compact forces near the Epsilon Eridani system, reported Captain Vasquez from the Tactical Center, her voice carrying the professional calm of someone who had expected exactly this outcome. Coalition vessels are reporting complete systems failure across all ship classifications. The holographic displays around the observation deck showed the battle in real time, transmitted through communication networks that operated faster than light, and processed information in ways that still challenged Zakthaz's understanding. What he was witnessing was less a battle than a systematic demonstration of the difference between advanced technology and truly evolved civilization. The coalition fleets had approached their targets with conventional tactics. Massive formations designed to overwhelm defensive positions through concentrated firepower. They had expected to face space stations and planetary defense grids similar to what they had encountered during previous conquests. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that didn't seem bound by conventional limitations. The Zarathi Empire's primary battle group is reporting complete engine failure. Captain Vasquez continued, reading from displays that showed the tactical situation across multiple star systems simultaneously. All weapons systems offline, navigation computers frozen, life support holding steady. Same pattern as we observed during your fleet's initial encounter with our defenses. Beside him, Commander Hickstal watched the displays with the expression of someone witnessing the end of everything he had once believed about military power. They're not destroying the coalition fleets, he observed quietly. They're disabling them. Every ship, every crew member, every weapon system, neutralized but not destroyed. The Compact learned something about warfare that most species miss, explained Ambassador Chun, who had joined them to observe the final act of the conflict that had been building for months. Destruction is easy. Any civilization with sufficient technology can build weapons capable of reducing enemies to atoms. But true victory requires changing minds, not just eliminating bodies. The displays showed the scope of the Compact's response with crystalline clarity. It wasn't just Earth's solar defense network that was engaging the coalition. It was a coordinated effort involving technologies from dozens of allied species. Zephyrian dimensional manipulators were creating spatial distortions that made coalition navigation impossible. Skyward Nation consciousness disruptors were overloading enemy command systems with sensory input that their minds couldn't process. Void Dancer reality anchors were preventing coalition vessels from retreating into hyperspace or folding space around their positions. How many ships are involved in the Compact response? Zakthaz asked, trying to understand the scale of the forces arrayed against his former empire. Approximately 300, replied Captain Vasquez. Though ships isn't really the correct term for some of our allied assets. Several Compact members contribute capabilities that don't require conventional vessels. 300 against 15,000. The mathematical impossibility of the odds only reinforced how completely the coalition had misunderstood the nature of their enemy. They had prepared for a conventional war between competing military forces. Instead, they had encountered something that transcended traditional concepts of warfare entirely. Admiral, Commander Hickstal said suddenly, his voice tight with emotion. The tactical display is showing the Eternal Dominion. Our former flagship is part of the Corvani assault force. Zakthaz turned to the indicated screen, recognizing the distinctive sensor signature of the vessel he had commanded for nearly a decade. The ship that had carried him to Earth for the first disastrous encounter with human defenses was now participating in an even more hopeless assault against the same enemy. He wondered which of his former officers was commanding her now, and whether they understood what they were facing. The Eternal Dominion and her escort group have just lost all primary systems, Captain Vasquez reported. Crews are unharmed, but the vessels are completely dead in space. Same pattern we've observed across all coalition forces, precise neutralization without casualties. Without casualties. Despite everything. Despite the coalition's clear intent to destroy Earth and every world allied with humanity. Despite months of military preparation aimed at genocide on a galactic scale, the Compact was still choosing mercy over vengeance. Every ship in the attacking fleets was being systematically disabled, but every crew member was being kept alive and healthy. Why? Zakthaz asked, the question directed as much to himself as to the humans around him. Why preserve the lives of enemies who came here to commit genocide? Why show mercy to species that have never shown mercy to others? Because, Ambassador Chun replied gently, someone has to break the cycle. For millennia, galactic civilization has operated on the principle that might makes right, that survival requires the destruction of potential competitors, that peace can only be achieved through the elimination of enemies. Every species that has achieved spaceflight has eventually adopted these principles because they seem to be the only way to survive in a hostile universe. The displays shifted to show the aftermath of the brief conflict. 15,000 disabled vessels drifting helplessly in space, their crews alive but completely helpless. Coalition commanders were broadcasting surrender offers, pleas for mercy, desperate attempts to negotiate from positions of absolute powerlessness. But the cycle only continues because species keep choosing to perpetuate it, General Webb added, his voice carrying the weight of decisions that had shaped the course of galactic history. Someone has to be strong enough to choose differently. Someone has to demonstrate that there are alternatives to endless warfare and mutual destruction. The Compact isn't just a military alliance. Explained pattern of thought becoming action. The Void Dancer representative who had been observing the proceedings with the detached interest of a being that existed partially outside linear time. It's a philosophical evolution. We've learned that consciousness itself is the most powerful force in the universe, and that consciousness used cooperatively can achieve things that no individual species could accomplish alone. Zakthaz studied the tactical displays, trying to process the implications of what he was witnessing. The Corvani Empire, the Zarathi Empire, the Bloodstars Consortium, and the Dominion Seekers, four of the most powerful military forces in known space, had just been defeated so completely that they no longer posed any threat to anyone. Yet their crews were alive, their ships could be repaired, their civilizations would continue to exist. What happens now, he asked. What does the Compact do with 15,000 disabled warships and their crews? We make the same offer we made to your empire 6 months ago, Captain Vasquez replied. Join the alliance. Contribute your strength to mutual defense rather than conquest. Learn to build instead of destroy. The only difference is that this time, the offer comes after a demonstration of what happens when diplomacy fails. And if they refuse again, then they'll be escorted to the edge of Compact space and released, Ambassador Chen said. Their ships will be repaired, their crews will be given supplies and medical assistance as needed, and they'll be free to return to their home territories. But they'll also be monitored continuously, and any future aggressive actions will be met with immediate response. The concept was staggering in its implications. The Compact possessed the power to destroy any conceivable enemy, yet they were choosing to transform enemies into allies through a combination of demonstrated strength and offered cooperation. It was a strategy that required patience, wisdom, and confidence in one's own principles that most military leaders would find incomprehensible. Admiral, General Webb said, drawing Zakthaz's attention back to the immediate situation. "We've received a communication from your former Emperor Council. Supreme Emperor Krothdar is requesting permission to negotiate surrender terms. He's asking specifically that you be included in any discussions, apparently hoping that your previous diplomatic experience with humanity will help secure favorable treatment for the Empire." The irony was not lost on Zakthaz. The same leadership that had dismissed his recommendations for peaceful cooperation was now asking him to help negotiate the consequences of their refusal to accept those recommendations. They had ignored his warnings about human capabilities, rejected his advocacy for alliance membership, and proceeded with military action that he had predicted would be catastrophic. "Will you meet with them?" Commander Hickstal asked. "Will you help negotiate terms for the Empire?" Zakthaz was quiet for a long moment, considering his options. He could return to Corvani space as a hero, the military leader who had helped salvage something from the disaster of the Coalition War. He could resume his position within the Imperial hierarchy, perhaps even advance to higher rank based on his unique experience with human diplomacy. Or he could stay where he was, among beings who had shown him that there were alternatives to the endless cycle of conquest and resistance that had defined galactic civilization for millennia. He could be part of building something new instead of perpetuating something old. "I'll meet with them," he said finally, but not as a representative of the Empire. As a member of the Compact, helping to mediate between civilizations that need to learn new ways of interacting with each other. Ambassador Chun smiled, the expression carrying genuine warmth and approval. "Welcome to the Alliance, Admiral." Officially this time, the negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic diplomatic history. Representatives of the defeated coalition met with Compact leadership not to discuss terms of surrender, but to explore possibilities for transformation. The Corvani Empire, the Zarathi Empire, the Bloodstars Consortium, and the Dominion Seekers were all offered the same opportunity. Membership in an alliance that would help them redirect their military capabilities toward mutual defense rather than conquest. Some accepted immediately, their leaders pragmatic enough to recognize which way galactic politics were evolving. Others required longer consideration, their cultures too invested in traditional power structures to change quickly. A few rejected the offer entirely and chose to return to their home territories, where they would live under the watchful eyes of Compact monitoring systems. But change was coming whether individual species accepted it or not. Word of the 17-hour war spread throughout the galaxy with the speed of quantum communication, carrying with it the news that conquest was no longer a viable strategy for ambitious civilizations. The age of military expansion was ending, replaced by an era of cooperative growth that promised benefits for any species wise enough to embrace it. As Admiral Zakthaz stood on the observation deck of Nexus Station, watching as former enemies became new allies and began the long process of learning to work together, he reflected on the warnings that had started everything. Earth had tried to avoid this conflict. They had offered every possible alternative to warfare. They had extended their hands in friendship to species that approached them with weapons drawn. But they had also made it clear that patience had limits and that some principles were worth defending regardless of the cost. The Coalition had chosen to test those limits and discovered that humanity's commitment to protecting the innocent was matched by their capability to stop those who threatened them. The humans had warned them. The Coalition had ignored those warnings. Now the galaxy was learning new rules, enforced by beings who preferred teaching to punishing, but were fully prepared to do whatever was necessary to protect the future they were building. In the end, that might be the most human thing of all, the willingness to fight for peace, to use overwhelming power in service of preventing its own necessity, to transform the universe not through conquest, but through the patient work of building something better. Earth's children could sleep peacefully beneath distant stars because their parents had learned when to extend hands in friendship and when to make fists in